My name is Abraham Kim. I'm the executive director at the Council of Korean Americans, and we're so happy to have our guest tonight, Nari Kye, and her friend Bora. Say hi, Bora.
Hi, A.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah,
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Dave. Hi.
we're so happy to have you this evening, Nari. Nari is the founder and teacher of the Woori School, Brooklyn, and she's been doing this since 2015. And Nari has firsthand experience teaching children and their families about Korean language and sharing Korean culture. And as many of you have seen from her bio, she is an Emmy Award-winning producer, director, and executive producer for over 16 years, and on the critically acclaimed series such as Anthony Bourdain, No Reservations, and Parts Unknown. And tonight we'll go into a little bit about her experience working with Anthony. And she's had on-camera experience on 5 episodes and won her Emmy as a result of the best culinary program on the PBS special, The Mind of a Chef. And then she had a director debut in 2017, producing a feature-length documentary, Wasted, the story of food waste. And that had Anthony Bourdain starring in that, as well as many notable chefs. But tonight, we're here to learn more about the Woori Show, which she started in 2019, a nonprofit organization that celebrates Korean language and culture through educational content with families everywhere. So with that short introduction, welcome, Nari, to CKA and our webinar this evening.
Yes, thank you, Abe. And thanks to the Council for Korean Americans for having us and allowing me to introduce Woori Show to all of your viewers. Thank you.
Well, Nari, let's get started from the very beginning. I understand you were born in Seoul, but you came to the United States, to New York, and then to New Jersey at a very young age. So tell us about your experience as a child growing up here in the United States.
Yeah, so I moved to America in 1988 from a very rural countryside town called Baekduni in Korea, like shigor. There were like rice paddies, there were animals and dirt roads. We moved from there to the Bronx in 1988. So you can imagine the culture shock that we experienced moving from there to the Bronx and speaking no English. And I have this very vivid memory of asking my dad on the airplane, you know, what I could expect. And he was showing me ABCs, you know, the alphabet, and he was trying to teach me these very fundamental things. And I don't think I quite realized the change that I was about to experience. You know, my parents talked about moving to America, but we were so young. My brother and I were so young. We didn't fully grasp it until we moved here and I entered into school. So I was 5 years old. And so I went into nursery school. We went to a Catholic school and, you know, they would be like, oh, hi, what's your name? And I'd be like, I don't know what you're saying. I came home crying every day for a year. And my mom tells me these stories of how sad I was that I couldn't communicate these very basic things to my peers and to my teacher. And I realized at a very early age, whether it was because of the trauma of moving or this new environment, I vowed to myself that I would become American. You know, I would perfect English and I would assimilate and no one would know or suspect that I wasn't born in this country. I remember having this, you know, a pledge to myself and to my family over dinner one night, you know, exclaiming that I wanted to really become a assimilated American. So, you know, even though I grew up in this household where we only ate Korean food, my mom cooked Korean food all day. And she was a very good cook, thankfully. We cooked Korean food all day. We spoke in Korean. We watched Korean television shows. You know, I'm sure a lot of you guys remember going to Hanarum and getting those VHS tapes every week and watching our favorite shows. So I remember watching TV shows, listening to Korean music. I went to Korean church. Actually, my father was a pastor of that church. So I went to Korean church a lot. So I was living in this kind of Korean bubble where, you know, I could be free to, express myself in Korean and love Korean food. But as soon as I left my home and I entered school or American society, actually that difference, that cultural difference, and the heritage that I possess, and the way I looked, actually made me feel very ashamed and embarrassed. And I hate to say it now because, it's such a part of who I am. But back then, all I wanted to be was just like the other white girls, just fit in and just kind of be wallpaper and not stand out. I really just wanted to be like them, and I have all these memories of, when my white friends would come over, I would run around the house and hide all of our Korean things and ask my mom to cook American food, even though she didn't know how to do that. So I have some kind of, embarrassing moments and some, sad periods where I treated my family, I think, not very well and not very kindly. But I think this is a story that, a lot of people can relate to. We are dropped into this environment where we look different. Our parents possibly speak a different language, and we have this very unique culture that's very beautiful. But for a young child, all you want to do is just blend in. So I grew up in this kind of, in the 80s and 90s, and a tough time to be a person of color in general, but in a very white society. And so, yeah, that was like a really big thing for me. I just wanted to blend in, and I was just constantly trying to hide my Koreanness. So it was tough. And I think a lot of you guys can relate to that. It was a tough period for me. But yeah, I grew up and I got to experience some pretty fantastic events that really changed my view on my identity and how I perceive the world, really, and how I engage with the world.
Yeah. And you, from that childhood, you became a storyteller and you went into film school out of that experience. Tell me about how that transition happened, where you uh, and you had some life-changing meetings in film school as well. But tell us how you went into film school.
Yeah, so I went into film school because I always was interested in media. I learned early on that there was obviously a huge lack of representation and visibility for Asian people on TV and films and in books and in music. One of my role models was Connie Chung. She was on television and she seemed very knowledgeable and powerful. And, I admired her because, again, one of the very few role models for Asian girls around that time. So I knew I wanted to be involved in media and storytelling in some way. And I fell in love with films in high school.
Yeah.
And my high school had a great program where they encouraged that and nurtured that with me. And I applied to NYU Film School and I got in. And my creative, I would say my spectrum really was broadened by that experience. And I met some key people that led me to my first job out of film school, which is where I met Tony Bourdain. So the job that I had meeting Tony was actually quite painful. And it was a post-production job where we had to log footage and look at all these videotapes of a show called 28 Days in Rehab. A lot of people yelling about how much they hated their fathers and that's why they were alcoholics and all these things. It was a not great show. So I worked on that as fresh out of film school. And I was like, I don't know if I want to work in television. I think I might want to try working in films. But these two producers that I work with, they're a married couple, Chris and Lydia. They were impressed with my work. And they're like, hey, we're going to start our own company with this guy named Anthony Bourdain. He wrote a book. And we're going to turn it into a TV show. And, it's about travel and food. And he's really smart and he's wonderful. Why don't you come along with us for this journey? And I was like, guys, I don't know about TV. I think I want to be a filmmaker. But they're like, look, just come and see how it is. And then, you can take it from there. And the rest is kind of history. I got to obviously meet Tony, who is this person literally larger than life, this enormous guy who was, I didn't know it at the time, but one of the most important people in my entire life. He became my mentor, an incredibly loyal and generous friend and colleague, someone that really truly can't be replaced. We, as you can imagine, our company got pitched everything under the sun. Everyone and their grandmothers want to be the next Anthony Bourdain,
Yeah.
but there truly will never be anyone like him. And he was incredibly kind and generous with me. And one of the life-changing experiences I got to have was taking him to Korea and telling my family story
Yeah.
and sharing that with the world on No Reservations. So the story of how we got there is very funny because we finished season 1 of No Reservations, and I was the production manager at the time, so I was lucky enough to plan some parties, and so I planned a wrap party, and this was in 2005. So my non-Korean colleagues had probably never had Korean food before. I don't even think Tony had Korean food before, but I made a reservation at Kunjip on 32nd Street in New York City, and we had lots of Korean barbecue. We had lots of soju, and we were having lots of rowdy fun. And Tony and I went outside and we were smoking. I don't smoke anymore, but we were smoking a cigarette outside. And in my drunken soju haze, I was like, you should really go to Korea. It's amazing. The food is so good. We're gonna have so much fun. And the next morning, Tony comes into the office. And he was like, hey, you better start planning that trip to Korea because, you're going to come with me. Your family's going to be on the show and we're going to go, And I was like, huh? I was like, we had that conversation.
Yeah.
So, that shoot in 2006 really changed my life. My grandfather was on the show. My grandfather, like many of your grandparents, escaped from the north to the south during the Korean War. And so he had this, very harrowing story that I got to tell. And, he rendezvoused with my mother, my grandmother in South Korea. And then my father was born in Korea. And I got to tell that whole story and experience lots of amazing Korean foods and, tell Tony about our heritage and all the wonderful things about Korea with him. And that really obviously was, life-changing for me. And like, as you said earlier, like before that, even in film school and my childhood, definitely, my Korean identity was, again, something that I never led with. This was such, I was always trying to fit in and assimilate to the rest of American society and always kind of almost suppress my Korean identity and my heritage. But it was this shoot and actually premiering the show and getting this feedback. And back then there wasn't social media.
Yeah.
We got emails and there was some YouTube comments, that people put up, Korean Americans from all over the country and the world who were saying like, wow, I've never seen another Korean American on television before. I'm so happy you were able to go with Tony and show Tony Korea. Your story is so similar to my family story. I got this tremendous feedback. And that whole experience really kind of, my Korean passion exploded with that experience. And it was at that moment, I realized that this is what I want to be as a person and as a creative storyteller. I want to share our culture and our language with other Americans.
Well, that show is many ways attributed to how, that's what Tony was known for, was to introduce and change the perception of the food culture and street culture, high food, culinary food. It was equally just as good food, and his ability to introduce to mainstream these foods that are often overlooked became that's why he was such a revolutionary person in the culinary world. And
absolutely.
and that show probably contributed to the perceptual change of how Korean food was viewed in mainstream. So it sounds like you were part of this important part of history of how Korean food was perceived in the United States.
Yeah, it was obviously an honor to be a part of that. But Tony was so good, and we learned so much about this after he died, was how accessible he was to people and how he touched people because he was able to bring people to the table, literally. He had all these like amazing conversations with sometimes Barack Obama or sometimes a local farmer, and he would treat them the same, like it's all kind of comes together around food. And he was able to tap into all these other cultures through that, experience that we all it's just such a common human experience through eating and sharing our culture and our identities through food. And so, it was just an honor of a lifetime to do that with him in Korea. And I got to do it again for Parts Unknown. And then we made this film together where we did highlight Korea as well again. But it was something that for me personally, it really kind of shattered all my notions of how I viewed myself and my identity. And that hidden passion that I did have, because I always loved Korean food. I always loved my Korean heritage and my Korean family, and I was so thankful for all of that and what my family did for me. And he just helped me unlock that passion. And then, of course, you couldn't get me to stop talking about Korean culture after that. I kind of have this weird obsession, like watching people eat Korean food for the first time. I just like stare at them. I'm like, is it delicious? Is it so delicious? So I just, and everything that I do from my daily activities through my work and my creative outlets, I'm always trying to do it from the angle of how do I teach people about Korean culture and language, and of course, Woori Show was the perfect project for me to have landed on,
Well, it sounded like your experience with Tony Bourdain helped create that confidence and that really explore your own Korean identity through your storytelling and food. And I want to push forward a little bit because you continue that in your life's journey in the work that you're doing currently as well. But before then, you after Tony passed away, you spent some more time at home, and you had your son, and that was a milestone moment in your life as well that changed your career. Tell us about that and how having that changed your storytelling and sharing of the Korean culture to a new
Absolutely.
community as a result of that.
Yeah. So I worked with Tony for many, many years. So I was traveling and working, and I got married, and I had my first son in 2013. And he really put into perspective what a lot about myself, but for me, what I wanted for him after being happy and healthy was to love his Korean heritage and also speak Korean. So top 5, it's pretty high up. So it was really important to me that he was able to stay connected with his Korean heritage through language. So I kind of doubled down on, speaking to him only, in Korean. And thankfully, because I kind of lived in a mini Korea in New Jersey, my parents only spoke to me in Korean, and my grandparents lived with me on and off for many years when I was a child. So I spoke a lot of Korean at home. I only spoke Korean at home. So I'm eternally grateful to my parents for that. Even though I hated it at the time, I was like, why can't we speak English like everyone else? So I was able to speak fluently to my son, and my mother came from New Jersey to Brooklyn and helped me with with that as well. So it really kind of put things into perspective of what I wanted for him, but also what I wanted for myself. Once I started speaking to him Korean, to him in Korean, reading to him in Korean, reading stories to him, singing to him, and making him Korean food and all these things, and things I used to do before he was born. But it really kind of put things into laser sharp focus for me that I wanted this for him, but I also wanted it for myself and my family. And it was when he was about 2 years old and he started talking a little bit that I knew that just doing this by myself wasn't enough. I needed to build a community for him. I wanted him to see other grown-ups speaking Korean. I wanted to normalize it for him. But even more than that, I wanted to make it exciting. I wanted to make Korean culture, all aspects of Korean culture, our history, our food, art, music, everything about it. I wanted to make it cool and exciting.
Yeah.
I grew up going to, like many of you probably have, going to Hangulakyo, Korean school, every Saturday morning in the basement of a church. And I got yelled at by a lot of Korean teachers. There were a lot of tears for me in Korean school. It was very strict. It was very, just like an old school, old fashioned kind of way of teaching. And I really hated it. It was not fun. All my white friends were getting to go swimming and play soccer outside. And I was stuck in this church for 5 hours on a Saturday every day or every weekend. And I really resented it. And I really did not like it. So all those memories kind of flashed before my eyes when my son was born. And I knew that I had to take a different approach. I wanted to lead with it being fun. I wanted him to really get excited to learn about the language, learn about the culture, and learn the language. So the community, aspect of it was tough. I was living in Brooklyn. There's a lot of places in New York, Queens, New Jersey that have large Korean American populations, but I really had to do a lot of legwork to find other Korean American families out there.
Yeah.
And there were some great listservs available in Brooklyn. So I reached out to some folks, and I actually had our first Korean sing-along. I knew a lot of the songs. I can play a little music. And, like 100 people came. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is something that people want. And just like I do, So I knew that I wanted to make this a regular thing. So I started Woori School. When my son was 2, it was a immersion program where we met once a week for an hour, and we would sing Korean songs together, and we would have puppet shows and story times in Korean. We would sometimes make Korean food like kimbap or kimchi, and we would have Korean snacks, and we would just have fun in Korean, right? So the parents were learning, the children were learning. There were kids who came to the school who didn't know any Korean. They didn't even know how to say hello. And like 3 or 4 months later, they were speaking Korean. It was really working. And that was the power of, engagement, the power of music, the power of beautiful stories. So I was learning with these kids and my own family how children absorb language and how to excite them about Korean culture. So that was a program that I ran for 5 years. I did it with my son, and then my daughter was born, so I did it with her too. And so over those 5 years, and I would say, so many families that came through that program, I was able to see firsthand, they were like my focus group of how kids learn and how English speakers specifically learn Korean and get excited for Korean culture. Because a lot of the parents, there were a lot of mixed race families. Only one parent was Korean, and many of them did not speak fluent Korean. So they knew a few words, or they spoke broken Korean, or they didn't speak any Korean, So, and we had some adoptees, like some families who adopted Korean children. And so they wanted them to stay connected to their language and culture. So we had a very wide spectrum of different families, and we were able to plant that seed. We were able to teach them Korean. They were singing the songs to themselves at home, and singing it to their parents. And the parents would come back. They're like, can you do this every day? Can we have Woori School be every day? And I was like, well, I can't. I have a full-time job, and I was still working with Tony and doing all my production work. So I couldn't do it full-time. But I knew that the demand was there. I can see the passion. I can see the desire amongst these parents to really stay connected to their Korean heritage with their children. And they wanted to pass that along to them, but they needed the resources. And I did so much research. So when my son was born, I trolled I went through the internet. I looked for, books and music and shows that spoke to my kind of family, and things that come from Korea are made for Korean children. They're not made for Korean American children. And I think the style and the way they teach is a little different than what, a lot of the parents are used to here in America. And, since a lot of the children didn't speak any Korean, they spoke English, I was able to use mostly Korean, but inject a little English as well, just so that the kids can understand what I was saying and the parents as well. So, Yeah, so
So
looking
we're seeing some we're seeing some slides here.
yeah.
Is this Woori School that we're
This was
seeing
Woori
here?
School. Yeah, this was
Okay.
my apartment in Brooklyn. And these are some of the families that would come every week. And I really miss that. It was such a special time. But yeah, they were the ones, the school and the families that came to the school were the ones that really, really activated my desire to share Korean culture with a bigger audience, because I knew that this method was working. I had some key components that I knew worked. After 5 years of the program, I knew it was ready to, grow bigger. So I was like, hey, wouldn't it be great if I can make Woori School, but for every family,
Yeah.
no matter where you lived in the world, you can learn about Korean culture and learn a little bit of Korean
So
language.
yeah, tell us a little bit about that transition from Woori School for
Mhm.
one community to the Woori Show for every community that can access your show. So tell
Yeah,
us
I'm
about the
actually
inception of Woori Show.
Yeah, so I was surprised that it didn't click for me sooner, having worked in production for 15 years. So yeah, Woori Show is really a marriage of two of my biggest passions, which is film and television production, storytelling, and sharing Korean culture and language. So in 2019, that kind of light bulb went off in my head, and I'm like, hey, I can put these two things together and reach a much bigger audience, and help more families stay connected or learn about Korean culture and language. So I decided that I knew that I wanted it to be community centered. So I started a nonprofit organization. And so myself and our board, our very small number of board members, we put together a few videos, and we did a little bit of like internal fundraising, and we launched Woori Show, and of course it was the middle of a pandemic. So we launched it in 2019, but we didn't start filming until 2020. And so our first show premiered in May of 2020. So at kind of the peak of the pandemic. So a lot of the show was me predominantly filming myself, clicking record, going behind the camera and doing my thing with my puppet friends here at home, and enlisting some other Korean American artists to work remotely, whether they were animators or other puppeteers or composers. And we just kind of all came together and formed a team, a Woori family, really, because we all were so passionate about doing this. Our mission is to share Korean culture and language with every family. So we all came together around that mission statement, and we started producing shows. We premiered monthly shows. We were able to make about 9 episodes. We made a Chuseok episode. We made a Seollal episode, and lots of fun, themed episodes, for a year. And so, like I said, we were very scrappy, and we did a lot of, it was almost like a beta version of Woori Show, because we were doing things so, lean and remotely because of COVID. And then in the spring of 2021, we got our first grant from the Joe Foundation. And that really kind of catapulted us into the next stage of Woori Show. So we were so lucky to have that first grant and give us really the confidence, and of course the financial boost that we needed to lift up the organization and do more active fundraising, marketing, and kind of sharing our show with the world. So this past year has been a really, really big year for Woori Show. We were a scrappy little YouTube show, and now we are, talking to all these wonderful people, talking to the Council for Korean Americans, and and working with a lot of different organizations, and new board members, and talking to a lot of other Korean American leaders and professionals who are really excited to help, especially parents. They are at the top of their field, whether it's marketing or in tech or, in media, people want to join the Woori family, I think, because I think it's something that people can really feel good about. You know, a lot of us are struggling to stay connected to our heritage. A lot of us are struggling to pass that to our children, you know, because obviously there's so much content out there. There's so much media, and there's and maybe too much out there. So it's hard to navigate that and find something that is high quality, which is very important to Woori Show, something that's very high quality, very thoughtfully made, and that feels like it's catering to your family. You know, we want it to be diverse because the Korean American community and the Korean American journey is diverse. You know, I am a mixed race family. A lot of your families out there, I'm sure, are mixed race. A lot of us are trying to become bilingual families, and that's a hard struggle as well. Woori Show really, you know, stemmed from my own desire I wish something like this would exist for my family. You know, it was a problem that I decided to solve myself. You know, a lot of Korean American entrepreneurs out there, they're like, you know what, I'm going to fill this need. And that's kind of what I did. I took on that challenge. I was like, I want this for my own children. So I'm lucky enough to have the skill set to make that a reality. So yeah, our mission is to celebrate Korean culture and language through engaging educational content for young learners and their families. It's important for me that Woori Show is a co-viewing show. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that term, but it's the idea is that parents watch it with their children. And this is one of the main things that I learned while doing Woori School was that children learn best acquiring a new language through humans. So, you know, apps are helpful, videos are helpful, but a lot of the real learning happens in real life, person to person. So the goal of Woori Show is for the whole family to watch and enjoy the content together and then go offline and practice singing the songs and cook the recipes and say some of the phrases and the words that you learned on the show, practice the alphabet or what have you through offline, because that's where the real learning happens, you know? So yeah, so this slide here says a little bit about our model, and this is all stemming from my firsthand experience teaching children, my own kids, and also the families that I taught at Woori School. So, you know, we use our number one, the best tool, and parents ask me this all the time. They're like, how do I get my kids to speak more Korean? The number one tool that I can recommend is using music. Music is incredibly powerful. Even if it's a very simple song like Nabia or Gomsemari or, you know, a lot of the songs that we grew up singing, songs carry so much power and weight. So I recommend to all families out there, if you have Spotify or streaming music services, there is Korean music out there. And Woori Show is also going to be, able tell you this. Well, we'll talk about this later. We have a Kickstarter campaign going, but if you donate at the $25 level, we will give you a digital music album of original Woori Show songs on top of a lot of our classic favorites. But, you know, Woori Show, we use classic songs, but also original songs to just teach very simple phrases like thank you, goodbye, 잘 먹겠습니다, or, you know, daily habits and routines, or talking about our feelings. So these are all kinds of things that we're trying to incorporate in with music. And so that once your child starts hearing that music over and over again, they're going to start singing it and they're going to start speaking Korean.
So what's the demographic age group? What's the age group that you're targeting with your programming?
Well, Woori Show is for all ages, but I would say, you know, a lot of studies have shown that a lot of the language acquisition happens, you know, 0 to 5. So the best age to have, you know, kids start watching Woori Show would be around 2. I don't know how people, you know, parents feel about screen time for younger kids, but 2 to 5, I would say, is our, if you start watching Woori Show and start kind of practicing more Korean between the ages of 2 and 5, you will see probably, some really good progress.
Yeah.
But my 7, almost 8-year-old loves Woori Show, so it really it spans the gamut, and it's a show that we're also growing up with the children. I watch a lot of shows kind of grow older as the kids get older. Like, so that's what we're trying to do as well. So we're a show that really tries to reach all audiences and all levels of learners. So my daughter she's native and fluent in Korean.
Yeah.
She still loves Woori Show. I have kids that don't know any Korean, and they're still able to understand and pick up rather quickly Korean language. So it really is a show for all ages.
I want to start bringing in some of the audience question here as we're kind of progressing in our interview here. But one of the questions that one of our audience member asked is, what is your inspiration as you're creating these various shows? Is it food, culture, language? What helps you to formulate, I guess, these the various show topics and the curriculum and obviously with the puppets and things, it resonates like Sesame Street a little bit, right?
Yes.
And so
Sesame Street is a big inspiration of ours. I grew up watching Sesame Street, Pee-wee's Playhouse, Bo Bo Bo. I don't know if you know those shows, but those childhood kind of very nostalgic shows from the 80s and 90s are a huge influence to Woori Show. Because again, I want the grown-ups and the parents to love the show as much as the kids, So I really want that kind of nostalgic, warm feeling that we had watching some shows when we were younger to really resonate in Woori Show. So some of those classic shows are a big inspiration for us. Honestly, my biggest inspiration is our viewers and our Korean American community. I think we have such an amazing it's an amazing time, let's say that. I feel like this generation has really just leveled up in everything. And like I said, people are doing amazing things in tech, science, media, the whole thing. And you guys inspire me every day, just hearing about the news, watching things on social media about what you guys are doing and what you're doing with your families. It really inspires and helps us kind of figure out how to plan the themes and the curriculum of our shows. We also have a team, of course, the Woori team. It's my collaborators and people who have worked on Sesame Street, people who have award-winning kind of professional backgrounds, running the gamut from educators, people who have firsthand experience tutoring children, speaking English, teaching them Korean, 한글학교 school teachers, language experts, child psychiatrists, psychologists, and other artists, of course. Artwork really dictates a lot of and inspires me, art and music, so visual and audio. So I try to keep in touch with a lot of different artists and see what they're doing, and listen to a lot of different music. And I think a lot of our inspiration is rooted in our childhoods, so my collaborators and what we grew up, loving the songs and what stories we loved. And like I said, just our childhood and what we loved as kids, but also what our generation is doing now. And food, like we talked about this, but food has been an incredible gateway for non-Koreans, especially, to dive into Korean culture. So we've leaned heavily into that. And my background with Tony and chefs, it kind of lended itself really well to kind of doubling down on Korean food and teaching kids Korean culture through food, because that I think is going to be another tip that I would give to parents for people who want to inject a little bit more Korean culture into your family. The easiest and the most delicious way to do it is through food. So food is something that's very important to us.
Yeah, so there's some questions from the audience. Like, for example, I mean, obviously you just started the show, you ended your first season, and you're introducing families and children to important cultural aspect, food, language, and music, and other things like that. But I guess there's some questions a little bit longer term in terms of what your vision for this program is. Like, for example, we referenced Sesame Street, right? Sesame Street was language and, and important habits and other things, but they also address social issues as well, teaching, exposing children to these important questions appropriate for the age. And I'm wondering, in your vision, is there plans to maybe introduce through Woori School or Woori Show, uh, issues related to that, what Asian Americans are facing today, I guess, essentially.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would say as equally important as it is for Woori Show to teach Korean language and culture, it is the other half of Woori Show is telling the Korean American experience. I think, you know, families can find other ways to teach their kids about Korean language, and you can go to Korean restaurants, and there's ways to expose your kids to Korean culture. But what Woori Show is very uniquely set up to do is to tell the Korean American story and all of our stories. And I think, like I said, that's equally as important to our mission, is to teach kids about our shared experience and have them be proud of their Korean heritage. So how do you get kids to be proud of their Korean heritage? You need to share with them a little bit about the history of Korean Americans, right? How we got here and all the amazing impact that Korean Americans have had on this society. So we want to feature Korean American role models. We want to tell our history, and we want to share all of these immigrant stories or adoptee stories, or all the stories of diaspora and Koreans around the world, really. So I think the long-term vision for Woori Show is to tell as many of those stories as possible and really inspire and excite children to stay connected to Korean culture, and their heritage, because the stories are what moves everyone, is what inspires people, and that is truly at the core of what Woori Show wants to do. And I hope Woori Show is around for as long as Sesame Street. Sesame Street just celebrated 50 years. If I'm around in 50, I would happily do this for the rest of my life, as long as we have the proper funding for it. The team is here. Our stories. We have infinite amount of stories to tell. And I really wish we can do this forever. And I do think Woori Show has great potential to expand into more of a lifestyle show. I really think that we can help families do all kinds of things. You want to, you're going on a trip to Korea next year, and you would like some recommendations on where to take your 5-year-old. Woori Show has got you covered. Oh, you're looking for a recipe for, spring kimchi. Woori Show's got you covered. You want to meet other Korean Americans in your area and cook together and celebrate holidays together. We got you covered. We want to become really a hub where Korean Americans can access all kinds of things to celebrate our heritage and our culture. So it's a meeting place, and it's a way, it's a place where you can hear stories that really resonate to us and share our culture in every way, really.
Yeah, it sounds like your experience with Anthony Bourdain coming into the Woori Show as well. And so I guess two important questions that people are asking. Number one is, where can they access Woori Show? And then secondly, how can they get involved? How can people get involved in supporting the work that you're doing, whether directly or indirectly? If you can share those two questions. Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that, Abe. So Woori Show right now is on YouTube. So it's important to us that it's completely free. So you don't have to, subscribe to anything. I mean, we ask you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, but you can view it for absolutely free. And I hope that we can continue to, share Woori Show with every family, and you'll have easy access to that. So if you go to YouTube and you Google and you search for Woori Show, that'll pop up, and you can subscribe, and you'll get notifications when we put up new videos. We have all of our episodes there. So we have all 9 episodes from season 1, ranging from about 10 to 20 minutes. And in September on Chuseok, we just premiered our season 2 episode season 2 premiere episode called The Chuseok Party, which is a 30-minute episode, and it's so beautiful and it's so fun. So you can find that there as well, and on top of all the different little musical segments, we have compilation videos of Korean songs and stories and all these different things. So you can access all of our content completely free on our YouTube channel. And we will continue to be on YouTube for absolutely free of charge. The other big thing that we have going on right now is we just launched our first Kickstarter campaign. And we are raising money to make season 2, the rest of season 2. So we hope to make many more episodes for you and your families. And we need your help. And we are, like I said, we're a community-centered, community-focused, and community-dependent nonprofit organization, really kind of for us, by us, kind of spirit. So we are asking all of our, viewers and all of our supporters to make a donation at our Kickstarter page. And I believe the link will be shared with you all. And it's exciting. We had our first day. We did really well. We had way over exceeded our first day goals, which is awesome. And our goal right now is 50,000. But to be totally honest with you, we can use a lot more than that because every dollar that is donated goes directly to more episodes. So the more money we raise, the more episodes we can make. So it's a direct link to that. So I hope that we can perhaps reach our stretch goal, which will be 100,000. But we will start with the 50. And so everyone here, if you guys can contribute in some way, and after you contribute, please share Woori Show and our Kickstarter with your friends and family, because that's, if I could say there's 2 big challenges for Woori Show. Number 1 is fundraising. But number 2 is reaching the families who want to watch Woori Show, and I think word of mouth is an incredibly strong tool. So if everyone here can just tell 2 other friends about Woori Show, and then, you do the math and it keeps spreading that way, we will really be able to help a lot more families stay or feel more connected to Korean culture and language. So I hope that everyone here tonight can share and contribute in any way they can.
Well, my staff is telling me we have a brief 1-minute video talking a little bit about Woori Show. That's part of your Kickstarter.
안녕하세요. Hi, my name is Nari Kye, creator of Woori Show, and I'm so excited to launch our very first Kickstarter campaign with you. Since I was a little girl, I've always loved stories. Sadly, I rarely saw or heard stories about people like me or my family on TV, in movies, or in books. When I became a parent, I wanted my kids to see themselves on television and hear stories about their heritage. I wanted them to learn some Korean and love Korean culture. And that's how Woori Show was born. Woori Show is the first Korean-American educational show that aims to teach Korean culture, language, and the stories of Korean Americans through short, fun, engaging, and accessible content. Woori Show is for kids of all ages. Whether you're an adult kid or have kids of your own, Woori Show is here to help any family feel a little more connected to Korean culture. Today, I'm talking to you because we're launching our very first Kickstarter campaign, so we can get started for season 2, yes, 2 of Woori Show. And the more money we raise, the more episodes we can make. Season 1 was built by the huge love and efforts of our team. For season 2, we'd like to be able to pay a living wage to all the people who help make our show. This includes writers, directors, puppeteers, actors, editors, composers, fabricators, animators, and all the wonderful members of our amazing Woori family. Your donations will also go towards the fun things that show up on camera. Puppets, costumes, props, and a space for us to shoot in, along with all the amazing equipment that is needed to make a show like ours. Visibility and representation matters more than ever. So let's tell our history and our stories with Woori Show. Join the Woori Show family today by making a donation and help us share Korean culture and language with the next generation. Thank you so much. 감사합니다.
Yay!
Wow, that it looks such an amazing program. I wish I had it when I was growing up. So
that is, Abe, you'll be shocked. That is the number one, like most given comment about Woori Show. Everyone is like, oh my gosh, wish I had this when I was a kid. And really, to be honest with you, making Woori Show is like therapy. You know, it's joyous therapy, because I'm making it for little Nari. I'm making it for little Abe. I'm making it for little all of us, you know, because it really, I think the lack of what we, you know, that lacking and that missing part when we were kids, we're able to pass that at least on to our kids, you know, and we fill that up in ourselves too, watching Woori Show and staying a little bit more connected with Korean language and culture, and being proud of our stories and our accomplishments as Korean Americans. So really, Woori Show is more than a show. It's therapy. And it's wonderful. It's as fun to make as to watch. It brings together amazing artists and a community. And we've made a community. And I hope that everyone here will join the Woori family. Really, it's a great place, and it's a fun place. So please come.
So what's the timeline in terms of what you're hoping to achieve and the second season coming out?
And depending on how much money we raise during our campaign in the next few months, we will plan out our production schedule for next year. So I'm hoping to film in the winter of next year, and then be in post-production in the spring. And then depending on how everything wraps up, we will hopefully premiere the rest of season 2 in the summer or early fall of next year. And we'll just roll them out all at once or week by week. We'll let everyone know. But if you subscribe to our YouTube page, if you give to the Kickstarter, or if you subscribe to our newsletter, you won't miss anything. We'll keep you closely updated on all of our progress. And we'd love to hear from you. You know, we love to hear how you and your family, you know, stay connected to Korean culture and celebrate, you know, different holidays, or, you know, cook food, or how you guys, you know, try to learn the language at home. So much of this is a circle. We give to you and you give back to us. And the feedback I've gotten and kind of the response has been tremendous. And it's been really helpful in writing and curating the curriculum and the episodes for future shows. So please email me. I think
in the chat we have hello@woorishow.org is that's the best way to contact you.
It is. It's the best way. But like I said, if you make a donation or if you subscribe to our YouTube page, you will also we'll also be able to communicate with you that way as well. So
how about in addition to financial support, obviously many people can donate, but are there other needs within to help continue your work aside from, I guess, financial and of course word of mouth you've mentioned before, but are there, I don't know, maybe talent needs or other things, post-production, studio space, what are some of the other needs to support?
We welcome all support in all forms. So whether that's through your time, because like I said, Korean Americans are amazing. And we have so many different talents that if you would like to come on in any capacity, either just as a consultant or an advisor or a board member, I am happy to speak with you and see how you can help, you know, Woori Show grow bigger and better. So there's time you can volunteer. There's also resources, right? So if you're, you know, if you'd like to get involved and donate, you know, space or equipment or your talent, we do pay our our team. So I'm happy to work with new artists, whether you're an illustrator, animator, puppeteer, an actor, a composer, or anyone that does anything Korean cultural. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't necessarily have to be Korean culture either. If you're a dancer or a fine artist, there's always a way to get Korean Americans involved. We are also going to be highlighting a lot of more, like I said, we feature more Korean American role models, and that can really be anyone, because we do all contribute so much to the society. So there's many different ways to get involved in Woori Show, and we welcome all of it because we need it. We need it, and we invite it. So please reach out in any way.
Well, we're coming to the end of the hour here, and we just want to, well, first of all, thank you for all the hard work, and it's obviously a labor of love, but also an important work as we as a Korean American community think about the next generation and how to 1.5 second, third generation, how to pass our legacy and our culture and our values to the next generation of not only our children, but to the broader mainstream community. And I think all of us are trying to crack that nut. And I think you're one of the very first people that I've met personally who have done that. And so thank you for that. And we hope that you will win another Emmy Award soon around the Woori Show.
Oh my gosh, that would be a dream come true.
Yeah, no, we'll be there. And
oh, well, like I said, this is a community effort, and I am so honored and grateful to be able to do what I do. So thank you so much. Thank you to the Council of Korean Americans. Thank you, Abe. Thank you, everyone who came out tonight. It means a lot to Woori Show and to me personally. And I hope that you guys all stay in touch somehow with me. Please, thank you.
So we hope for your great success, and thank you very much for all that you do. So have a great evening, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you. 감사합니다. Bye, everyone.
Good night.